It wouldn't be a stretch to say that Sean Strickland has some of the best defense in the entire promotion, or at least in the middleweight division, where he boasts 61% in striking defense, meaning that 61% of his opponent's strikes either miss, are avoided, or get blocked. No one in the top 5 in middleweight can match this stat. Using the Philly shell, paired with textbook leg checks, he simply deflects most incoming strikes. Sean's defensive prowess became especially evident after his dismantling of Adesanya in their title bout. So why did one of the most defensively sound fighters in all of mixed martial arts completely let down his guard and get rocked by a left hook? Pereira's left hook. A left hook that Sean was aware of as Pereira's primary knockout option. To answer this question, let's look at how Pereira sets up the left hook. Or more specifically, how Pereira conditions Strickland throughout the first round leading up to the KO. Conditioning, or operant conditioning, is a term coined by psychologist B.F. Skinner that explores methods of learning through rewards or punishment to encourage or discourage voluntary behaviors. It's kinda like the sequel to Pavlov's classical conditioning, if you recall Psychology 101. I briefly touched on operant conditioning in my last video, but very few people saw that one, and there's a lot more to be covered, so let's get into it. There are 4 types of conditioning that can be applied to fighting as shown on the chart. We can break these down into pairs: reinforcement, which seeks to promote a desired behavior, and punishment, which seeks to stop a behavior. The positive and negative simply refer to the addition of a stimulus or the removal of a stimulus. To condition Sean, Pereira uses negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement works by removing an adverse stimulus to promote a behavior. But first, there must be an adverse stimulus in place to be removed. The stimulus Pereira provides is hitting Sean's body with punches. So Pereira will only take away these adverse punches when Sean exhibits the desired behavior, that behavior being the dropping of Sean's right hand, as he seeks to block the body shot. An easy example of this is the beeping in your car that occurs when you do not have your seatbelt on. It doesn't stop until you buckle up.
Would you mind buckling your seatbelt?
So how many beeps does it take until Sean is annoyed enough to put on his seatbelt? Looks to be around 8 or 9 beeps. This works especially well as Pereira has the opportunity to hit the liver, an especially bad place to get hit, which, if hit, would ultimately speed up the conditioning process. So this would act as an ear-piercingly loud beep instead of the normal one. Once Pereira has conditioned Sean to block low, he can now see the change in Sean's behavior, and now reliably predict that this behavior, having been influenced, will continue, leaving Sean's head wide open. Then, and only then, will he remove the stimulus. And by that time, it's too late for Sean. He has been outplayed. Now that we're done with negative reinforcement, let's look at an example of Pereira using positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement encourages a behavior by providing a rewarding stimulus. This is the classic giving your dog a treat for doing a trick. Pereira's knee and uppercut setups primarily use positive reinforcement. He does this by attacking the high guards of his opponents. Any shot that is blocked is an added reward for Alex's opponent, and the desired behavior is to simply keep using the high guard. Pereira wants his opposition to shell up so he can eventually tee off to the body or break the guard from underneath with a knee or uppercut. So instead of constant mix-ups like throwing one punch upstairs, one punch downstairs, Pereira will purposely hit the guard to give his opponent a reward for having a tight high guard. While it's true that some block strikes like checking leg kicks sometimes hurt and could be considered an adverse stimulus, most block punches make you feel like Neo, so by and large, I will consider them rewards. Pereira's use of positive conditioning is especially clever because whether Pereira is hitting you or not, he's still working towards a finish, achieving an objective instead of mindlessly throwing volume as so many pro fighters do. So even blocked shots can be an amazing tool, even when they don't lead to damage. Many times when an opponent puts up a high guard, Pereira immediately starts attacking the guard, reinforcing their behavior, letting his powerful shots get blocked. And he actually has a video on this exact topic. For those of you into poker theory, this is increasing Pereira's expected value, or EV. While Pereira could probably land a couple body shots when an opponent has a high guard, if he attacks the guard, Pereira will get a much bigger payout later in the fight. So while it may look like a suboptimal decision in the moment, it's actually the optimal play in the grand scheme of things. Now that we've covered reinforcement, let's look at punishment. In direct contrast to reinforcement, which tries to promote a behavior, punishment is all about stopping a behavior. First, let's look at positive punishment. So we are adding an adverse stimulus to stop a behavior. This is the classic talk shit, get hit scenario. This is probably the most common use of conditioning in the sport, and when commentators use the term punish, this is generally what they are referring to. Even the most amateur fighters understand that if an opponent slips up, you have to hit them for it. The most notable example of positive punishment in Pereira's game is his leg checks. By checking an opponent's leg kick, Pereira adds an adverse stimulus, introducing the opponent to some of the worst pain in the entire sport when shin meets shin, and this in turn discourages his opponent's continued use of leg kicks in the future. The leg kick war has taken on its own little mini-game within the grand contest. Whichever fighter is winning the leg kick battle will often be rewarded with better movement and more power as the fight progresses. By checking his opponent's leg kicks, Pereira discourages the leg kicking behavior, leaving him free to land more of his own leg kicks in the fight. Pereira has trained this so well in his kickboxing days that it's on autopilot. He doesn't have to actively think about this. It's simply muscle memory, leaving him free to focus on the other decisions influencing the fight. But really, any time an opponent has a slip up, Pereira will attempt to punish. Think of Roundtree beginning to throw wide in round 3, Yuri dropping his right hand when striking. These are all behaviors that Pereira punishes, and it only takes one punish to end a fight. Last, and the most difficult to find an example for, is negative punishment. So we are taking away something to stop a behavior. So this would be like a mother taking away a child's toy because the child is misbehaving.
He cried when I took it away from him.
The only example I can think of for negative punishment is taking away space from the opponent, which Pereira is a practitioner of. By now we all know how important having space is inside the octagon. If an opponent is provided lots of space, he has more options defensively and offensively. In Pereira's eyes, an opponent that has too much space is an opponent that is misbehaving. So Pereira makes it a point to encroach on his opponent's pocket, and in turn this makes them have to choose an option and gives him something to download. This is why Pereira stopped the intervention by Herb Dean. Pereira was in such a good state of advantage, with Jamal's back to the fence, it would have been stupid to concede the position. Other examples of negative punishment could include taking away the limb of an opponent, like with a calf kick, which is a punishing move, but on a broader scale you're taking away the use of the leg, which, if the opponent is moving or kicking well, is behavior worth inhibiting. Another good example is Burns versus Bilal, when Burns' arm gets compromised receiving too many kicks from Bilal, and Burns basically has to fight the rest of the fight an arm down. To wrap this one up, we have identified an example for the 4 forms of operant conditioning present in Alex Pereira's game. This is important because even the most skilled fighters fall prey to this form of psychological conditioning. So it's no wonder why Pereira is so effective at not only KOing his opponents, but always getting better as the fight goes longer.